Now on to the recruiting situation, because you've got your student athletes who are very invested in that particular school, want to go to that school, and they are going to stand pat. Um, it seems as though that is less of a qualifying factor than it used to be. I just get the feeling, I've got nothing to back this up statistically, but in years gone by, there was more allegiance to school, area of the country, state than there is now, where, and it's not a criticism, it's just a change, where there's such a relationship build up, because you got to compare the way recruiting is approached today versus 20 years ago. 20 years ago, there were phone calls, there
Mm-hmm.
were some emails, and that was pretty much it. Now it's during the time that they're allotted, an everyday contact, or on a regular basis, I should say, through social media. And the relationships become much, much more established for those last couple of years in high school. Therefore, I think it makes sense and is reasonable to understand that most athletes, or many of them, will then gravitate to whomever they've built that allegiance to and that relationship with, and they're going to jump ship. And that's what we're experiencing now. But that's not all negative. Of course, I think most people think about everyone that's going to be lost and not necessarily what could possibly be gained.
Yeah, no, that's fair, Mark. And I think just to start from the beginning, from the relationship perspective, and you hit the nail on the head. That's very, very important in this day and age. I think there's a couple of things that kids probably look at when they're recruiting to a team. One is, especially a very high level recruit is looking for a combination of a coach and a program and a team that they feel like that is able to put them in the best position possible to get to the next level. But I think, Mark, to your point, a lot of these, it's not always necessarily the school, not necessarily how good this team is about that, but I think more so, Mark, exactly what you said, the relationships that some of these recruits have built with these positional coaches or coordinators or whoever it was that had been recruiting them hard. So I think Oklahoma has lost a few in the 2022 cycle that is just honestly just a casualty, unfortunately, of the changes that are going on. A little bit surprising, not not entirely, but a little bit surprising that Venables decided he basically is getting rid of the entire defensive staff. So a little bit surprising in the fact that specifically a guy like Calvin Thibodeau, who played for Venables at Oklahoma, has done a really good job on the recruiting side. I think there's some maybe concerns on how well he's able to coach just from a day-to-day positional perspective and being what Oklahoma needs to have. But so I mean maybe that's a little. Jamar Kane is another guy that has been really instrumental in getting some of these, in getting some of the talent upgraded at Oklahoma. But as we saw on the field, maybe the development's not necessarily where Oklahoma needs it to be, at all times. So you don't blame Brent for wanting to come in and kind of have his guys and put his staple on the program. So yeah, I mean, there's a couple of recruits that Oklahoma lost based on that, but you have to assume that based on who Oklahoma is going to bring in staff wise, which really hardly anybody has been announced outside of just today. There was a coach from Clemson, off the field coach who was going to come in and coach Oklahoma's defensive ends. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. It just happened just right. His name is Miguel. I'll get his name here. First name is Miguel. I'm trying to get his last name here, but he was on the off field role, and he's moving on to Oklahoma, going to be the defensive end coach. Really hasn't been announced by Oklahoma, but he has announced this on the social media pages. So I mean, I would assume that's pretty well a good indicator. So, and I think the last point that I'll make, and just completely agree with you. There'll be some recruits that have committed to Clemson that certainly will decommit and either choose to go to Oklahoma or somewhere else. There'll be some commits maybe from Ole Miss or other programs that Oklahoma might be bringing in coaches for. But I think at the same time you have a limited amount of time here in the early signing period. So it's very critical that Oklahoma gets into some of these kids' um, homes and just be able to at least have that conversation with the kids, trying to get them. Maybe some of them that have flipped away from Oklahoma. But I think Oklahoma probably will be very busy from a transfer portal perspective, and even the late signing period as well.
Miguel Chavis is
Yes, yes, yes.
the addition to the defensive staff.